Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these Harlequin Wirework earrings. So these are definitely impactful and statement earrings, and you can of course make them to match your own personal style, and actually you can also make them match a previous bracelet that I did recently that are called Harlequin Wirework Bracelet. You can just use similar materials and they'll make a lovely set. If you're interested in the tutorial for that bracelet, I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below. But otherwise, if you want to learn how to make these earrings, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we need. Now we need two different gauges of wire, and I'm using a regular round silver coated copper wire for both. And the first gauge here is a 1mm, this will be our base wire. And then the second gauge is a 0.4mm, and this will be our weaving wire. And then we need our beads, and the main ones I'm using here are 3mm bicones. They're going to slot in perfectly with our zigzagged wire. Now I have 18 in total for the decoration around the edge. And there's 9 of each colour, and then I have 2 extras for the dangle in the middle, where we're also going to need this single 6mm bicone. Of course you can mix and match your colours how you want to, or just use one. Now also for the dangle in the middle we need a head pin, and I'm just using one with a ball on the end. And also just a short length of chain it's going to dangle from. 3 4mm jump rings to attach it. A 16mm ribbon end. And along with that also some glue. I'm using this E6000, it works great with metal and it's nice and strong. And then of course our earring finding of choice and a 5mm jump ring to attach it together. Now the materials I've showed you here is to make one earring, so if you want to make a pair you need to double it up so you can of course make 2. Now we also then just need a couple of tools, so first of all I have some flush cutters here to of course help cut the wire. I've then got some chain nose and tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire and for the jump rings. And finally we need a wire crinkler tool. Now this is how we're going to achieve that perfectly zigzagged wire. And of course you can find the full material list and useful links in the description box down below. Otherwise let's get it all ready and let's get started. We then need to cut some wires ready. So what I have here is 5 lengths of my 1mm of about 20 centimeters each. Now one of them we're going to use with the wire crinkler tool to zigzag it, and the rest we're going to weave around. We then need a length of a 0.4mm here of about 1 meter, and we're going to use this to attach our beads to the zigzagged wire. And then another length of the 0.4mm wire, this time about 3 meters, so we're going to use this to create the weave along the outside edge. Now the first thing we've got to do is zigzag one of our wires, so I'm going to bring out the wire crinkler tool here. And as you can see we have a little lip down at the bottom which has a hole that you can feed your wire through. And then what you do is just basically push it in to the point where it catches between the 2 cogs, and then you start to push them like this, so you can see the wire goes in between them and gets that perfect zigzag. And one has a little handle you can hold on to, and you just basically keep doing this until you've zigzagged the whole wire. So just like that. And then we have a perfectly zigzagged wire, and if you find that it has a bit of a curve, don't worry about that. You could either choose to straighten it out depending what you want to use it for, but in this case we might as well work with it because we're actually going to turn this into a teardrop shape. So just gently start to bring your wire further around so the ends start to come towards each other, obviously without losing the zigzag. And then have the wires meet up towards the top here. Now this is also where you then want to determine the size of your piece. So in this case I'm going to make sure that I have 18 triangles here, so the point where the beads are going to sit on the inside. So I just want to count that to make sure that I make them connect in the right place. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I actually need to step down 1. And then just count again to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So actually something like this. Now what I'm then going to do is have 2 straight sides meet up just like that. And then what I like to do is just kind of straighten out the rest of the length, just so we also know exactly where that connection point is, but also so we have a little bit of more length of the wire to hold on to. So I now know that when it springs open like this, these two are what I need to make sure are sitting next to each other without having to count every time. So then just make sure the shape is exactly how you want it to be. And of course, this is also the point where if you're making a pair and you've already made the first one, you can start to make sure that they do line up and they are the same size. Of course they should be because we are counting, but you can still just double check. And it's also just to make sure we get as similar a shape as possible. So for instance, it could be that one is ended up being a bit wider than the other one. That also means it's going to be a bit shorter. And in that case, you could just kind of squish it a bit on the sides. That will make it a little bit less wide on the sides and then just lengthen it a bit. So just get them as even as possible. But then otherwise, we then need to grab our short length of the 0.4mm wire here. And basically we're just going to connect it together. So first of all, I'm going to bring a short end underneath up here where the two ends meet of the base wire, and then I'm just going to wrap it around the bottom one first of all. And what we're doing is focusing on the two straight pieces at the end here, and then wrap over the top of both of them, back up through, come up between them, and then over the top one by itself. So this is a diagonal wire weave. I do have a more detailed tutorial, but we're only going to be using it right up here at the top just to basically connect the two sides together. And I'm just going to do that a couple of times. So again, around the bottom one by itself. You can always use your pliers to help squeeze your wraps tighter together. Over the top of both of them, and then up through our teardrop shape here, so we can wrap around the top one by itself. And just do that until you don't have any more space to wrap. So once we've filled in that space there, we then need to start moving our way down so we can start adding our beads on the inside of this shape. So what I'm going to do is just take my length of wire and just continue to wrap it around. Now just one side. I'm just going to focus on the bottom side here, and then just keep wrapping it around that base wire until we get to the other side of the very first point. So just do however many wraps that you need to get there, because that is then the place we're going to add in our first bead. So that's where I'm at now. I can see that my bead is going to fit just perfectly in that little space. So what I'm going to do is go to the end of my wire here and grab the first bead, add it onto my length of wire, let it drop all the way down, and then if I just let it sit there, you can see that's going to slot in perfectly in the zigzagged wire. Then what we need to do to fasten it is bring the wire through the middle, because I'm still going to be wrapping around the base wire in the same direction that I've been doing, but we're then just in these little triangle spots going to add in the beads. And then I'm going to go straight to the other side of the point here where the bead is sitting into, and then basically just wrap around that base wire in the exact same manner. And again, same principle. We now just want to do however many wraps we need to just to get to the other side of that point, which is then the next gap where we're going to add in our next bead. So I've then just come over the top of that point to the other side of it, and we're in position for the next bead to be added in. So again, I'm grabbing the end of my wire, and then I'm going to add my next bead. And in this case, I'm just alternating the colors, but of course, like I mentioned, you can just do it however you want to. But then same principle, this is going to slot in perfectly in that zigzag gap. Bring the wire through the middle, continue wrapping in the exact same way that we've been doing. So we're basically just coiling around the base wire, and along the way adding in our beads in the gaps of the zigzagged wire. And same principle, keep wrapping here, wrap over the top of the point to the other side of it where we then need to add in our next bead. And you just want to keep going like this all the way around, only on the inside where we add the beads, until we get up to the other end. And this is what it looks like once we've gone all the way around. Now it's also at this point when we're putting the shape together that you can control the size of this. So of course you can always make it smaller or larger. Now if you want to make it larger, you will probably have to work with some longer lengths in the beginning, but you can of course accommodate for that however you need to. Otherwise, since we're done with this weaving wire here, we can get rid of it. So I'm just going to grab my cutters, cut off the excess. And if you have a little tail left, just make sure to tuck that in so it's not sticking out. And otherwise, the next step is to use our remaining base wires and create the frame around this, and we then also need a long piece of weaving wire. So we're going to grab the base wires and the weaving wire here, and we're just going to use them on their own to begin with. So just taking one base wire at a time and just keeping the others handy. What I'm going to then do is take the end of the weaving wire, put that over the top of the base wire and do it towards one end here, and don't leave too much of a tail. Then what we're going to do is attach the weaving wire to the base wire by wrapping it around just a couple of times. So once, twice, 3 times, and that is fine. You can always squeeze your wrap together using your pliers whenever you need to. Now from here I'm going to bring in my next base wire, place it above the first one and then on top of your weaving wire, and then I'm going to go over the top of both of them from above here and come down over the top and then back up towards the top behind. Grab the next base wire. As you can see, we're building up the base wires gradually. This is just while we're attaching everything together. Then again, come from behind and then go over the top of the now new 2 top wires. So that means I'm coming down between the bottom 2, so down between here, and then use that to push down. You can use your nails. Like I said, you can use pliers to help squeeze everything together. And then come up and just bring the weaving wire here up around the top one. Now bring in the last base wire, and this will be the new top one and the permanent top one. Then what I'm going to do is take the weaving wire, go back around the top of just that top single base wire, all the way around and come back up in the same place. So we just wrapped around that top one by itself, and that's also the midpoint of this little section. So we now need to step back down, which means the next one is going to be over the 2 middle base wires. So I'm coming down between the bottom 2, push that nice and tight, come up between the middle 2, so we're in position to wrap around the bottom 2 now. So go over the top of those, and that is basically finishing off this little first flurry, you could call it. So this is kind of a little section on its own, and then what I'm going to do is wrap around the very bottom base wire, literally coil around that on its own. And I'm just going to do it 5 times in total. So that's twice, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times. And these little coils are basically going to create the space in between the little flourishes, so the individual sections there. And then we're just basically going to repeat what we just did. So we're going to just go up between the 2 middle base wires. And then every time I'm wrapping, I'm also pushing down with my finger there, come over the top of the bottom 2, and then we step up 1, so up between the top 2 base wires, and then wrap over the top of the middle 2. That means we're coming down between the bottom 2, and again push everything down nice and tight. And then this is where we just need to wrap around the top one by itself, which means I'm coming up underneath it so I can wrap all the way around it and come back up in the same place, just like that, and then move back down. We need to wrap over the top of the middle 2, come up between the 2 we just wrapped over the top of, and then over the top of the bottom 2, and that has basically finished off the second flourish now. So this is going to be the pattern of our weave all the way along, and all we're going to be doing as we're making it is attaching this to the piece with the beads. So I'm going to show you that we have this kind of little beginning point. And then of course you just need to make your individual wraps on the bottom wire here to create that spacing, but I'm just going to stop at doing about 3 or so for now, and then from here we're going to bring this together with the section we've already made with the beads. So I'm bringing that in, and then the little section we just weaved, what we're going to do is basically end up lining it up on one side here, right at the very first bead. So this is going to be our first connection point. So we just did a couple little flourishes, a little weave section there, just to kind of get us started. So I'm going to hold that in place. Now to attach them together, what we're going to do is just get a whole length of wire here and just make sure we don't get any kinks. I'm just going to get all the way to the end, and then basically we need to bring this wire up in between the bead and the base wire where it's been bent and the bead is basically fitting in perfectly. So hopefully you should have enough space to just push your wire through. If you find that it's a little too tight, what I find can sometimes help is if you cut your weaving wire here at an angle instead of cutting it straight across, so like that, it creates a bit more of a needle point, and obviously it can get through a finer space. So you just want to push your wire through. And also I find it helpful to sometimes use your pliers instead, because what I'll then do is grab very much towards the end and just leave a short little end, and it can grab onto the wire much better than you can with your fingers, and then just help push that through. And you can see it's gone straight through there. And then you just want to gently and carefully pull this length all the way through. Now of course right now it's very long because it's still in the beginning, but as we go further you'll use up more of it and it'll become a bit more manageable. Just pull that all the way through, avoid getting any kinks, so nice and gentle, and then bring it all the way to sit nice and tight next to each other, so we end up with something a bit like that. And then I'm just going to bring this weaving wire around the base wire of the zigzagged wire here. Just once is fine, and then straight we're going to pick back up the weave that we were doing. So I've done 3 single wraps around the bottom base wire, which means I'm going to just finish that up. So I'm going to do another 2. Make sure everything's nice and tight. Again, it's handy using your pliers. So that was 1 and then 2, which then makes the 5 in total. So we now have the 2 pieces connected together in the first place, and we just want to keep doing this. So again, I'm going to keep doing the same weave, and I'm due to make the little flourish next, so that means I come up right in the middle of everything to wrap over the top of the bottom 2, come up between the top 2 to wrap over the top of the middle 2, and then do the single wrap around the top one by itself, come up in the same place, and then we move our way back down on the other side, over the top of the middle 2, up between them, and over the top of the bottom 2. And then back to doing the single wraps on the bottom base wire. Now what we basically just got to do is weave as much as we need until we, on these base wires here, run into the very next point where they meet up. So this is now the outer points we're working with of the zigzagged wire. So you literally just want to do your weave in the exact same way all the way along, and then whenever you run into a point and they match up, you just want to connect them in the same way that I showed you there. And it doesn't matter at what point that the connection points are. They're not positioned in certain places throughout the weave. It's literally just whenever you run into a point where they would connect. And of course you then shape the base wires along as you go as well, to get the same shape of this teardrop shape of the zigzag wire that we already have in place. So now we made it all the way around. It looks a little something like this, and as you can see up here, we don't have a lot of the base wires left. So if you're a bit worried that you're not going to have quite enough to make it all the way around, then you might just want to make sure to start with a bit longer lengths here. That's why I mentioned in the beginning, just make sure you don't leave too long tails. And also on the end, I just continued the weave just a little bit, just like we did when we started out, before we started attaching the pieces together. And now that we're done, we can get rid of the excess of the weaving wire here. So all you want to do is just flip it to where the wire is coming, cut off the excess, and obviously also cut off any other tails that you have left, and then just squeeze down that little end of wire you're going to have left. And then, as you can see as well up here, these lengths of the base wires are kind of got different lengths left, so we just want to straighten that up a little bit. So first of all, in the middle, I'm going to just cut the longer one down a little bit. And basically what we're aiming at doing now is get more or less a straight line across here so we can easily fit the ribbon end on top of it. So I'm just going to go all the way, just do one wire at a time. We get shorter lengths here. And then I'm going to do all the wires except for, in this case, just the one. So this outer one here, normally I would leave one on either side, but the one on this side is very short, as you can see. So it's fine to just use one if it's the same for you. But then what I'm going to do is take my tweezer nose, and then the long one that we left on the one side, I'm just going to bend it to come in over all the others. So just bend it so it goes over the ends of the wires here. I just personally like having something that goes in the opposite direction for when we add on the ribbon end. It's just going to help stop it from pulling off or sliding out through the end. Even though we have the glue, I still prefer to have that extra kind of safety net inside of it. And then I can see it's a little bit too long, so just cut it down. If you do have long enough lengths on both sides, just cross them both over to the other side, and you can just cut through both of them in the middle. This one I'm just going to cut further towards the other side. So we have something like that, and then we can always just test it out. I'd rather adjust things now while we still can. And the ribbon end is going to then sit there nicely. So of course we need to add some glue and then be able to finish it off. So it's going to be nice and secure. So I'm going to grab my E6000, and then I'm just going to use a toothpick here as an application tool. You can use whatever you have, even a scrap piece of wire. Then, just get rid of that. I'm just going to add some glue onto the toothpick. And then I want to first of all get it inside of the ribbon end here, and just make sure to get it on the sides, on the inside here. You don't have to fill it up completely, because of course we are going to then put the wire inside as well. But what I also like to do with the remaining glue that I have on, or if you can take some more, is just put it on the end of the wires here, the part that's going to go inside the ribbon end, because that way when the two pieces dry, when you put them together, it's going to really adhere nice and strongly. So just something a bit like that, and then grab the ribbon end, place it over the top of the wires there. Then I'm going to just grab my chain nose and start squeezing this down, and I like to go a little bit from side to side. I'm just holding it in place with my fingers here until I'm almost all the way down. I'm then just going to remove and check that it's still sitting how I want it to, and if I'm happy with it, I'm just going to go in and do my final squeezes. So nice and tight, so the teeth really go down and grip around the wire. And I like to just squeeze from the sides as well. And there we've then attached our ribbon end. And of course we have a loop up here where we can just attach our finding. And then the only thing left to do really is add the dangle in the middle. So to make the dangle, we're just going to need a few materials. So this is where we have our head pin, the large bead, and then two of the smaller ones, which I've obviously prefer color wise. A little length of chain, again the length will be up to you and what you prefer. And then I have the 3 4mm jump rings. So I'm going to grab the head pin first of all, and then our beads as well. So I've got the 2 smaller ones and the bigger one. I'm first of all going to add a small one, and then I'm going to add the large one, and finally a small one. So we have a little one on either side of the large one. It looks like that. Then we need to make a wrapped loop above the beads. So make sure the beads are pushed all the way down and you have a little gap between your pliers and the top bead there. And then put about a 90-degree bend into it. And then you can use a pair of round nose pliers. I'm using 6W pliers here. And just place them and bring the length of the head pin here all the way around the pliers, so we get a full circle like that. And then from here, before we finish it off, we need to just make sure that we attach the chain. So just put the very last loop on the chain onto the wire here, and then make sure it sits in the loop like that. And we're going to then grab chain nose and then just press them down on the loop, making sure again the chain stays in the loop. And this way it will hold its shape while I'm then taking the length we have left and wrapping it around below the loop and basically filling in the gap we left until we have no more space left. And the beads are kind of fastened in place as well. So something like that. And then we just need to cut off the excess here. So cut it off nice and tight, get rid of that, and then just make sure to squeeze down the end because it will be sticking out a little bit. So always make sure to get rid of the ends so you can't feel them with your fingers. Now here we have the dangle with the chain. We then basically just need to attach this to the earring, and for that we'll be using the jump rings. So I'm just going to have them handy. And then I'm also grabbing my earring that I made. Now what we're going to do is attach one jump ring on either side here of the top middle, so in either little corner. So I'm going to just start with that. So grab a jump ring, and then we just need to open it up. So just like you would open a regular jump ring, and then you want to attach your jump ring through either one of those kind of corner gaps there at the top, and however you need to hold it to be most handy. And then of course we need to just close the jump ring back up so it's sitting just like that, and you just want to grab one of the other 4mm jump rings and attach that in the other little corner. And then we have the final jump ring that again we just need to open that up, and then this one goes into both of these jump rings, so it can be a little bit fiddly, but just take your time. So into both of the jump rings and through them in the same direction like that. And then we also just need to add the dangle. So that's the final link on the other end of the chain, then the beads like that, and then of course just close up this jump ring as well, and then you have your dangle hanging just perfectly there in the middle and adding a little bit extra life to it. And then of course just add your earring findings as well. And then if you want it to be a pair of earrings, of course you also just got to make the second one, and like I mentioned, it's kind of easier to do that alongside each other so you can measure them as you go. Otherwise, I really hope you like these earrings. They're very impactful, and of course you can make them look however you want to according to your own personal style. Now if you want to see more tutorials, I have loads on my channel within many different mediums, so feel free to check that out, and also don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future ones. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.